in the span of a single rotation of the Earth. The geostrategic chessboard of the Middle East was upended. We witnessed an unprecedented diplomatic and military maneuver. The sudden, heavily publicized agreement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, followed by an abrupt unilateral closure. Less than 24 hours later. To the untrained eye, but peel back the layers, and it reveals a highly calculated stroke of strategic whiplash, designed to seize absolute control of the negotiation table. To truly grasp the gravity of this maneuver, one must understand the unforgiving geography of the strait itself. At its narrowest bottleneck, it measures a mere 21 miles across, with the shipping lanes confined to just 2 miles in either direction. Yet, this slender maritime corridor acts as the jugular vein of the global industrialized world. Nearly 21 million barrels of petroleum and countless tons of liquefied natural gas transit these waters every single day, representing roughly 1/5 of global consumption. It is not merely a waterway. It is the ultimate global chokehold. For decades, traditional naval powers, particularly the United States, have relied on overwhelming conventional military mass to dictate the terms of engagement in such critical theaters. The deployment of carrier strike groups and guided missile destroyers is intended to project an aura of absolute invincibility. However, what we are currently observing is a masterful execution of asymmetric leverage, the established playbook of maximum pressure, historically wielded by Washington through sweeping economic sanctions and formidable naval deployments, has been radically reversed by weaponizing pure unpredictability. A regional actor with a comparatively microscopic defense budget has effectively paralyzed the maneuvering space of a maritime superpower. This cycle of talking and fighting, of opening and closing, forces the opposition into a reactive posture. They have transformed the strait into a tactical labyrinth, where advanced radar, satellite surveillance, and stealth technology are rendered impotent against the raw, volatile power of geographic command and psychological disruption. The strait is no longer just a body of water. It functions as a geopolitical cardiovascular valve. By constricting and releasing it at will, the controlling actor is inducing an artificial geostrategic arrhythmia, sending calculated shockwaves straight through the central nervous system of international diplomacy. Ultimately, the illusion of conventional military dominance evaporates the moment an adversary refuses to fight symmetrically, choosing instead to sit at the negotiating table with the ocean itself held as a strategic hostage. Deed. When such geopolitical tremors strike the Middle East, the global public instinctively fixates on a single glowing metric: the price of crude oil. It is a natural reflex, a psychological scar deeply ingrained since the twin oil shocks of the 1970s, when sudden physical shortages and embargoes brought industrialized economies to a grinding halt, forcing long lines at gas stations and crippling inflation. Yet, obsessing over the daily fluctuations of a barrel of crude in the modern era is a perilous distraction. The reality is that today's global energy markets have become profoundly financialized. For every single physical barrel of oil extracted from the earth, dozens of paper barrels are traded in the speculative futures markets of London and New York. This means the price you see scrolling across a trading screen is rarely an accurate barometer of genuine physical scarcity or geopolitical risk. Rather, it is a highly elastic derivative, violently swayed by algorithmic trading platforms and the mere whisper of diplomatic rumors. We witnessed this exact phenomenon just days ago. A single Unconfirmed reports hinting at a potential reopening of the strait immediately triggered a massive speculative sell-off, sending prices plummeting from over $100 down to $90 and subsequently crashing below $88 within hours. This extreme elasticity proves that headline oil prices are easily manipulated. They can be engineered by a well-timed press release, a deliberate intelligence leak, or a tactical pause in hostilities. Therefore, the true strategic cost of this ongoing standoff cannot be accurately measured in the temporary, manageable spikes or dips of energy futures. The rapid trading of paper contracts in the electronic ether creates a dangerous illusion of containment. It acts as a sophisticated financial smokescreen that entirely masks the severe, structural damages quietly accumulating in the physical, tangible world of international commerce. We must view the price of oil not as the engine of the global economy, but merely as a superficial warning light on a dashboard. Treating the symptom by artificially manipulating the warning light does nothing to repair a fractured engine block beneath the hood. The true devastation of this conflict is not found in the fluctuating cost of fueling a cargo vessel, but in the terrifying reality that the vessel itself may be permanently anchored in hostile waters, rather than fixating on those flashing red lights of the trading screens. We must recognize that the true catastrophic impact of this standoff is silently unfolding across the world's oceans. The immediate and most terrifying danger lies not in the abstract cost of energy, but in the physical rupture of global supply chains. Modern international commerce operates on an incredibly delicate, tightly wound rhythm known as just-in-time delivery. It is a system built on the absolute assumption of frictionless movement, where a delay of mere days can cascade into a logistical nightmare. When a primary maritime artery is severed, the consequences do not manifest immediately on supermarket shelves or factory floors. Instead, there is a deceptive, agonizing time lag. The colossal cargo vessels, currently paralyzed outside the conflict zone, were actually loaded 4 to 6 weeks ago. The minor shortages or price bumps we are experiencing in the present moment are merely the ghosts of supply chain decisions made over a month in the past. But consider the reality of the current blockade. What happens when the massive loading cranes at global megaports freeze? What happens when fleets of ultra-large container vessels, each carrying up to 24,000 steel boxes, filled with everything from advanced semiconductor components to vital agricultural fertilizers, are forced to drop anchor and drift indefinitely? We are looking at a systemic, structural breakdown of maritime logistics. Even if a diplomatic miracle occurs and the waters are declared unconditionally safe tomorrow morning, the physical backlog will take a staggering amount of time to clear. Maritime intelligence agencies estimate that for every single day a major geopolitical choke point is completely closed, it requires up to a full week to resolve the subsequent congestion at destination ports across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. If the current fragile 2-week ceasefire agreement fails to hold, and the maritime blockade is extended, the international community will cross a point of no return. By the height of the coming summer, the world could. We are not merely looking at a frustrating shortage of manufactured consumer goods, but a fundamental collapse in global food security. Tens of millions of tons of grain, cooking oils, and essential agricultural exports rely entirely on the smooth, uninterrupted operation of these precise maritime corridors. We are witnessing a slow-motion heart attack in the vascular system of global trade. The true measure of a global crisis is never found in the deafening noise of the initial explosion, but in the silent, creeping paralysis of the supply networks that keep the modern world alive. Furthermore, the most astonishing development of this entire geopolitical theater occurred quietly in the shadows. entirely missed by the mainstream financial press. Amidst the chaos of the blockade, intelligence reports confirmed that exactly 8 specific cargo vessels were granted unimpeded safe passage through the contested waters. Why these 8? The answer is not about the national flags flying on their masts, but the currency flowing through their underlying financial ledgers. To secure their clearance, these maritime carriers agreed to settle their massive energy transactions exclusively in the Chinese currency, the renminbi. They bypassed the established Western financial architecture entirely. Moreover, when these favored vessels traversed the danger zone, their satellite positioning systems were completely deactivated, rendering them virtually invisible to conventional orbital surveillance networks. This was a targeted, highly calculated green light, proving unequivocally that loyalty to an alternative financial mechanism can directly guarantee physical security in a contested geostrategic environment. To comprehend the sheer magnitude of this paradigm shift, we must look backward to the year 1974. That was the era when the petrodollar system was officially cemented, establishing an unwritten but unbreakable global law. If you wanted to buy or sell the vital fossil fuels that power the modern industrial world, you were forced to use American currency. This systemic monopoly granted Washington an extraordinary, exorbitant privilege. It allowed them to seamlessly weaponize international financial clearing networks, effectively turning the global banking infrastructure into an aggressive instrument of foreign policy. For decades, the application of extreme economic sanctions has successfully cut off dissenting nations from the essential lifeblood of international trade, suffocating their economies without firing a single bullet. However, the relentless application of extreme pressure inevitably forces the creation of alternative escape routes. The utilization of the renminbi for large-scale energy settlement is not entirely unprecedented. Bilateral agreements between major Middle Eastern oil producers and China have been quietly expanding for several years. But a settlement mechanism that was once widely considered a fringe alternative, or merely a slow-moving diplomatic experiment, has now been violently thrust into the mainstream by the sheer necessity of economic survival. When a military crisis of this magnitude strikes, structural economic shifts that would normally take decades to evolve are suddenly compressed into a matter of days. The recent maritime blockade acted as a brutal real-world stress test for global finance, and the established dollar monopoly failed to maintain its absolute grip. Think of the dominant global financial system as an ancient, highly pressurized dam. For nearly half a century, the petrodollar has successfully held back the immense, crushing weight of international commercial trade. What we just witnessed with the safe passage of those 8 vessels was not a total structural collapse of that dam, but the sudden appearance of a deep high-pressure fracture. The flow of capital has found a new, alternative path through the solid concrete. The ultimate power in international relations no longer belongs exclusively to the nation that can launch the most missiles, but rather to the nation that can confidently dictate the currency of survival when those missiles are flying. Yet, we must understand that the global dominance of the United States dollar will not evaporate overnight in a spectacular cliff-edge collapse. The architecture of global capital, which currently processes an astonishing $7.5 trillion in daily foreign exchange transactions, is far too massive and deeply entrenched to simply vanish. However, what we are observing in the immediate aftermath of this localized maritime blockade is a permanent, structural hemorrhage. When a severe geopolitical crisis forces international shipping actors to successfully deploy the renminbi for the large-scale settlement of physical energy commodities, And when that emergency measure proves unconditionally reliable, a profound psychological and operational threshold is irreversibly crossed. The emergency bypass procedure rapidly morphs into standardized, institutionalized behavior. If we examine long-term macroeconomic data provided by international financial institutions, the underlying trajectory is unmistakable. At the dawn of the 21st century, the dollar constituted over 71% of all allocated global foreign exchange reserves. Today, that figure has steadily and quietly eroded to below 59%. While central banks across the global south have aggressively accelerated their accumulation of physical gold and diversified currency assets, the recent weaponization of Western clearing networks, specifically the freezing of hundreds of billions in sovereign assets during parallel geopolitical conflicts, has served as a stark warning. The events in the contested strait act as an intense catalytic accelerant to this pre-existing statistical decline. When sovereign nations witness that utilizing an alternative currency network can literally guarantee the physical safe passage of their vital cargo through a heavily fortified war zone, the entire strategic calculation shifts. It is no longer merely a question of seeking favorable monetary exchange rates or lower transaction fees. It becomes a fundamental, existential imperative of national security and sovereign supply chain survival. The true danger to a unipolar financial order is not a sudden, explosive global rebellion, but the quiet, systematic, and entirely rational normalization of alternatives. Every single energy contract cleared outside the established framework, every barrel of oil traded without touching the traditional banking infrastructure, represents a permanent, unrecoverable loss of leverage. Imagine a majestic, centuries-old oak tree towering over a forest. It is rarely felled by a single dramatic lightning strike, but rather by the relentless, invisible spread of a subterranean fungal network that quietly hollows out the structural integrity of its massive root system over many seasons. To the casual observer, the sweeping canopy still appears vast and imposing, but the foundation is already critically compromised, simply waiting for the inevitable storm to expose the internal decay. The era of unipolar financial gravity is silently fracturing, replaced by a multipolar reality, where the ultimate currency is no longer just paper money, but the guaranteed physical security of sovereign survival. Ultimately, the closure of a strait is a physical blockade, but the shifting of a currency is a geopolitical tectonic shift. As the dust settles in the Middle East, the true legacy of this standoff will not be measured in barrels of oil, but in the slow, irreversible rewriting of the global financial architecture. What are your thoughts on this silent transition of power? Leave your insights below.